Firstly, I'm going to invite each of the speakers to introduce themselves, their organization, and their technology, their vehicle, their idea. Then, the second round, we're going to talk about some of these common issues around approaches to, say, innovation, and how innovation can be piloted, scaled up, introduced to the mass market. And then finally, and this is also part of the brief and the scope here, is we have to put electrification into the broader area of sustainability. And I think that's one thing that I haven't heard too much in this conference this time, is the linking between electrification, net zero, decarbonization, which is indeed what it's all supposed to be about. So is electrification enough to achieve transport and mobility decarbonization? What else is required to get to net zero? Not by 2050, but actually sooner than that, if we're going to stay under 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees in the Paris Agreement. What else is required? And any questions that you in the audience may have as well. So with that, we'll kick off. Just to go down the order of that I have.
Okay.
Martin, if you would like to introduce yourself and EVUM and the ACAR.
Thank you so much, and happy to be here. My name is Martin, as said, CEO and founder of EVUM Motors. At EVUM, we are dealing with mobility, and in a special niche, and in a mobility connected with work. So we are providing an electric commercial vehicle, light commercial vehicle, and are trying to optimize the way how the vehicle is being used, which vehicle do you need, trying to understand the needs of our customers group, and not only optimize the number of electric vehicles which they have, but even the way how they use them in order to reduce the CO2 emissions and electrify the fleet and create impact. So what we have is the ACAR. It's our product which we have. It's a light commercial electric vehicle with 1 ton of payload. It has all-wheel drive, so it can be used in off-road. It's a mobile power bank on the wheels already today, so it's capable of vehicle to load. You can use many tools using the electric plug which is in the vehicle. And it can be used for different purposes, and for municipalities, for gardening in the parks, for janitorial services. That are the markets and the segments and use cases which we are aiming for. And what we see is not only dealing with mobility is the one thing, but we see, especially in the commercial fleets, it makes sense to make it a part of energy solution. So we are now introducing the V2G functionality, which we'll have this year for all these vehicles, that you can, even when the vehicle are not being used, it's your energy storage. If you have too much energy, and you can connect it to the grid, and the battery is an asset which you can, in that case, use even if the vehicle is not being used. And that's what we are working on.
Okay, then moving on to Rida and EV Blu.
Thank you, Jonathan. Well, I came from security, credentialing solutions, and data and AI background. In a personal level, I have been involved in recently throughout my career in the startup scene, and either as an angel investor or a business developer, an entrepreneur. In 2022, and being part of a startup working on the middle mile and last mile operator, we've discovered an opportunity in the electrification of the light mobility modes, especially the two-wheelers and three-wheelers. The market was badly in need, given the economics that have been affected by the global energy crisis and the other pressure being put on the users especially of the commercial riders in last mile delivery, to find solutions for certain struggles related to the very high cost of ownership of their vehicles. We started working with the aggregators across the region in finding a solution or building up a platform that plays the role of enabler, helping the ecosystem to transform light mobility to EV technology. And since then, Blu EV was active in building up partnerships with the OEMs, the regulators, the last mile operators, and other stakeholders within the ecosystem to introduce affordable and cost-effective solution, sustainable yet to the end users, through building up a platform of battery as a service application that would allow the user to access our services and get a subscription of battery of a service instead of outright purchase to those devices. That made the initial investment on the vehicle much cheaper, and the operational cost have lots of saving where those gig workers would benefit and impact their social and economical aspects. Since 2022, we've been working intensively, myself and a couple of other co-founders on Blu EV. We've reached to our MVP in September 2022 and went out pitching our solution to potential investors. We struck a deal with one of the largest investment holdings in the region that have seen the potential in our startup having this similarity between the commercial model of Blu EV and the telecom industry. Orascom Telecom recently reformed as Orascom Investment Holding, got on board as our principal partner and main investor, and since then we've been busy working and rolling out our platform across the market, starting in Egypt, with plans to cover the EMEA region in the near future.
Okay, so just moving on to Ahmad and autonomous pantographs, I think.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Jonathan. I'm Ahmad Kamar. I represent Schunk. I'm a product manager. Been working on automated charging devices for the past 8 years. So Schunk is a German company. We have over 10,000 employees and active in 26 different countries. We come from a background in high power current transmission in railway. And about 10 years ago, we started this new idea of having high power conductive charging for electric buses. So the idea started as opportunity charging for electric buses, mainly to extend the range of buses, because back then the range was quite insufficient for city buses to complete a full day route. And the idea was to have opportunity charging on certain strategic areas along the routes to extend the range of the bus. And of course, it was not possible with conventional cables for the driver to step outside and go plug in the bus and for a few minutes. So that's why we came with the idea of having the whole system automatic. And since then, we have had a great success in Europe. So the pantograph system, what it's known as the pantograph system, has been the most used system for charging electric buses in Europe and in North America recently as well. And now we have evolved or updated our portfolio for other solutions for electric trucks, logistic vans, and so on. So basically for other types of transportation.
Okay, and then finally, Bjørn, I think you've done lots of things and lots of technologies. So
Yeah, I'm from Norway. I've been working on electric vehicles since 2008. Remember driving one of the first cars we had then. There were three. There was Riva from India, there was Think from Norway, and Buddy from Norway. And if you had less than 50% state of charge, you could not go into one of the tunnels under Oslo because you didn't know if you would get up on the other side. And we've come a far way. Later, I've been working on electrification in emerging markets. I was fortunate enough to be part of building the first charging network in Egypt, the first chargers on the West Bank, also in Israel, actually. So I've seen how EVs brought a lot of people around to sustainability. And one thing we've learned is that there's a lot of naysayers, a lot of people saying that, this cannot be, these electric cars cannot get uphill, and for sure, heavy trucks, you can never do heavy trucks with electrification. What about these huge machines in mines? No, you cannot do that. Yes, you can. What about huge vessels? Yes, you can. So what is very clear, if you're trying to understand where this market is going, it is that it's impossible to beat the energy efficiency and the cost efficiency of electric propulsion, provided you can have enough energy with you to do the job you're doing, and that you're not stopping frequently. If you're stopping frequently enough, and you can charge quick enough, you can electrify pretty much anything. Now, what does that mean? It means that if we look beyond cars, which in many ways is complicated, it's been interesting to listen to the discussion here with people talking about essentially principal-agent problems, where the companies rolling out the infrastructure are not the ones using them. They're confused drivers, which is very difficult to coordinate. So we're starting at the wrong end in some ways. It's a much easier thing to do, and I think with Schunk you mentioned this as well. If you do a commercial fleet within a confined area, it's much easier to coordinate. You get much higher utilization of the infrastructure, and you get much better user experience because you can hone in on those users. You don't have random users coming up to a random station, downloading a random app to try to figure out what the heck to do. And so in many ways, I'm very encouraged with the opportunities this brings. Now, what does that mean in concrete, right? So, a couple of examples. In Norway, in Oslo, if you come, absolutely every bus running for the municipal transport provider are electric. All the ferries operating are electric. All the digging machines that are operating on work slots are electric. Can you do big, huge machines electric? Absolutely, you can, right? So this is already happening, and the first message is these things only happen because somebody locally decides. It's not a national plan necessarily to roll it out. It's local decision makers to say that we want to do this, and we're inviting the private sector to join in. Now, what we're seeing is just some numbers for you. In Norway, we have already more than, we have about 100 car and speed ferries already running fully electric. We have more than 100 work boats, so there's an aquaculture industry and patrol boats running in hybrid modes. So basically they'll do anything from 50 to 80% of their operations with electricity. And we're seeing such operation opportunities here in the Middle East as well, where you have short distances, vessels will run for half an hour, then stay still for 10 hours, then run half an hour back. You don't need a huge battery for that to happen. And with electricity, you don't have the noise, you don't have the smell. It's a much more comfortable experience for workers. And so what we are doing now is working with fleet operators across the region to develop such electrification schemes. We have an office here in Mastar as well, and looking forward to discussing with anybody who's interested. Well, part of that means that we take care of providing the vessels, we provide the charging infrastructure, make it easier for the fleet operators to figure out what to do. They do not know, do I need a CCS? And we might say, well, actually, for this application, the connector from Schunk might be a better idea. And so that's the role that we take in sort of orchestrating, helping compose the solution. Yeah. I really love the battery swap solution that you've developed in Egypt as well. I think these are the kind of, not trying to be a general solution, but honing in on some use cases and be that like perfect hand holder for those that are committed. And what we're seeing as well, of course, is that the private sector, I mean, if you drive an EV or if you've seen an EV as a private person, it's much more likely that you will make a decision to go for this as a corporate decision maker as well. And so hopefully this event will have given a lot of corporate decision makers an opportunity to get their hands on an EV and maybe even test drive and realize it's not so far out as people will, as naysayers tell you.
Okay, so that's a good round of kind of opening remarks, and I think we're going to keep it specific for the time being, because I think trying to have generalities covering such a wide range of technologies and approaches and models is quite difficult. We will try in a minute. So I'm going to sort of have some follow-up questions to each of you on your specific application, but also maybe to think of how could it be scaled up? How could it be more widely applied? Or do you stay kind of very niche? And also, from your experience of being a startup or a relatively small kind of product, what are the challenges actually that involves, and how do you kind of look to expand? So I will start with Rida, and you mentioned battery as a service. Now that's something which has been mentioned a few times during this conference. It does seem to, it's been used in two ways. One is the very small vehicles, so like motorbikes and scooters. Some have also talked about it actually for the larger vehicles, where you may have a large operation which is almost semi-industrial in its scale, and therefore you can invest in the equipment to do the battery swapping. But I mean, let's keep it on the scooters and the motorbikes, and what the benefits and what maybe some of the drawbacks are of battery as a service or battery swapping, and is it something that could be more broadly applied, or is it something which is very niche to what you're providing?
Well, there are two folds actually of mobility as a service in as such. I mean, first of all, wherever solution you have, wherever solution you're addressing a customer with, you should think of scalability and affordability. Scalability, that means that this what we start today with a light vehicle or a small kind of batteries when it comes to EV technologies, that has the possibility to scale up later on to a larger kind of vehicles, fulfilling and having the potentiality of expanding the solution offering to a larger population. Nevertheless, I mean, that should always be related and linked to the customer needs. And the light mobility, affordability is a key element. Most of the users of the light mobility are those of either low income or limited financial resources. They are commercial riders that use their vehicles to make their livings. And in order for them to have accessibility to a sustainable solution, if it's not affordable, it's not commercially viable, it won't make a lot of sense, so it won't help you to roll it out on a larger scale. So here, innovation is not related only or about the way that you put the setup of the different pieces of the solution together from an automotive and engineering plus technology perspective to make that possible, but also to have the right business solution and business offering that would make it attractive for your users. And when you have this availed in a way or another, when you have that kind of foundation, then you get the resources to scale it up to cover other aspects of vehicles or other aspects of passengers. What we have done with the gig workers, we've studied very carefully their needs, the performance that they are used to, the number of hours they work, how to help them come over the downtime, what is the cost of the vehicle with the batteries and without batteries, and we ended up with a solution that giving them a total of 30% savings of their running cost and 20 to 25% less in the total cost of ownership of the vehicle itself. That's been a game changer for all those users and make our solution quite demanded in the market, especially that we work through partnerships with the last mile operators. If we look at the market outlook when it comes to e-commerce, when it comes to food delivery, grocery delivery, we are talking, in the MENA region, we are talking a market of a size ranging from $25 billion to up to $50 billion projected to reach in 2030. Those numbers create a huge demand and for last mile operation. And last mile operation is mainly dominated by the light mobility, by the 2- and 3-wheelers. If you have that economies of scale, then you can think of developing more tools and more solutions for battery as a service and mobility as a service. We believe at Blu EV that transportation or mobility as such, as an industry, will be changing quite rapidly in the coming few years. We don't see the ownership, the outright purchase of the vehicle being the driver of this industry anymore. It's how to provide cost-effective, affordable solution, but meanwhile sustainable. And sustainability here is not about, it's not a luxury. It's not something that would be driven by the intention and the goodwill of the user. If it doesn't have an economic sense for them, it's quite impossible to scale it up to the volume that we are aiming for.
Yep. Okay, so it's about focusing on the needs of the customer and your market, having the right business model. Total cost of ownership clearly is vital. Just moving to you, Ahmed, on the opportunity charging, because that's something which is often discussed. I've heard it particularly discussed in the context of public transport networks, and if you're trying to electrify urban buses, do you go for depot charging as your mainstay? Do you go for a mix of depot and opportunity? Again, for the kind of in the context of potentially scaling something up, what are the practical issues of actually rolling out opportunity charging, particularly if you're, say, an operator? If it's in the depot, you have control over your land, your assets. If you have opportunity charging, then effectively you're going someone else's land, municipal land, there's planning issues. How do you kind of get beyond some of those practical issues?
Yeah. So as I think I'll use the comments from Bjørn that there is no one solution to fit all. So you need to look at your operation and see what's the best that suits you, how you can solve your challenges. So we see operators, as you mentioned, only focusing at depot charging, because this is where they have more control. Maybe this is where they can get the charging infrastructure, the permits, and the energy to this part of the city, for example. But we see also the mix and match. So they have some in the depot and also at the same time use opportunity charging. And this gives you some decentralization of the amount of power you need to run your whole fleet. So maybe I cannot get, I don't know, if I have 100 vehicles and I need, I don't know, 2-3 megawatt of charging power, maybe I cannot get it at one place. So maybe it's a good idea to diversify or to decentralize my charging infrastructure along my routes, so I don't need to have a huge power transmission in one location. And the second thing that we need to look at is also what's the range of the available trucks, or if I have 250 kilometers to drive per day, do I need a truck that covers 250 plus as a reserve? Or maybe I can use opportunity charging to extend this range, and hence I can lower my capex. Because one of the biggest challenges we see, and I come back to Rida, is that people focus, or some people focus on the capex. Oh, electric vehicles are very expensive, but they don't really focus on the total cost of ownership. And so you really need to see the whole operation run. Normally for buses, as an example, they look of a 12-year lifetime of buses, and so you need to really look in the future what's going to be my total cost of ownership. And hence you can really find the best solution for your operation. And as you mentioned, if there is a challenge in certain areas, so I cannot get permits on this location, then maybe I can use another solution for that. So we're trying to provide much more flexibility on how you can run your operation.
Yeah.
So Jonathan, maybe I can add that in terms of we're working with truck OEMs and also with truck operators. You essentially have three applications. You have the short urban hauls. They run up to 200 kilometers per day. These are the early segments that are deployed. They typically will charge either at their own depot or at their customer depot. There's some that have been trying to do charging at their destinations as well, but what you see is they prefer to go to slightly larger batteries so they can only charge back at their own depot, just to avoid this principal agent problem. With buses, we saw initially the first track being a lot of these opportunity chargers. You've seen a move away from that with just larger batteries, so you can only charge at your home depot. That means you still get pretty high power charging and fast charging during the day, during a lunch break, but you avoid that principal agent issue. Yeah. Now, with the trucks, you have the second application, which is more regional, where I drive between multiple depots in a region. I might drive 200-300 kilometers between each, and then I will charge at the destination as well. That requires a little bit more coordination, but it's still within the customer. So you have the operator and the customer of the operator. So it's still within the realms of, okay, we can coordinate something. But what you see is still a problem where the truck is going to arrive then. When can I get the grid connection? So one of the solutions that we have developed now also in Sweden is batteries integrated with fast chargers. So we have 450 kilowatt hour of battery and 450 kilowatt of charging with expandability towards MCS. And that allows you to roll out within a couple of days. You use whatever grid connection you already have, and you can see you can take away some of these barriers. When do I get the grid connection done? And only when you've done this, you're going to see long-distance trucking across Europe, for example, or across the region, where you have to think, well, what about public charging and stuff like that? There's a tendency for us to think like, well, I'm driving far, so I'm worried about charging on the go. Yeah. This is not how this market works. And so we need to stop thinking about that and thinking, no, it's much easier because you know who the players are that you need to speak to. And when you can marry this charging infrastructure with battery infrastructure, you see that you can get a cost that is on par with installing a fast charger with the groundworks and grid connection, but you can do this within days. Yeah. So that's how I see you can make this simpler and demystify a little bit the whole deployment.
But on that, and this is specifically on the trucks and the longer distance trucks. So this will be urban buses, or because there are other models, there is other thinking. We've heard, I think we heard yesterday, we've heard a number of times for the longer distance, larger vehicles, is it as much about hydrogen and fuel cell? And there's also an approach called electric road systems, which is opportunity charging, but actually it's the whole road. Yeah. So effectively, it's like a trolley bus. Yep. Effectively. Quite niche application, or do you see potential for...
Very much a niche application, and I see it impossible almost to coordinate the investment that is needed for that. For the electric roads, I can hear the engineering arguments. I mean, I can make them. I can tell you a beautiful story. But then I can tell you, okay, how are you going to coordinate the public investment, the standardization? Yeah. It's the same reason why you don't get open source battery swap for cars. It's such a huge, enormous investment. I think it's a different story for motorbikes, and
absolutely.
It's been proven for motorbikes,
right.
Also Gororo in East Asia. So this is different.
Yeah. And nevertheless, there are certain, initiatives in that direction.
There are initiatives, but getting...
But still very much costly.
It's very different with motorbikes because the battery costs a fraction. A battery swap station costs a fraction, and you can have the operator actually manually swap it himself.
You're absolutely right.
A battery swap for a car or truck is so extremely expensive. When you go to China and you interview truck drivers there who have the choice of battery swap and fast charging, they always prefer fast charging. And why is that? Well, when they have to do battery swap, because it's such a high capital outlay to have a battery swap station, you have very few slots. So you have to wait in line. And you have to be with the truck while you're swapping the battery. You can't go out, take a smoke, doing all what the truck driver wants to do, right? Or have a coffee, go to the toilet. He has to be with the truck. He parked the car, it fast charges. When he's done with his break, it's done charging. Yeah. So there's a lot of engineering great solutions that think it has a problem to solve, but when it comes down to it, it turns out that they have other ways of solving that problem in a much easier to coordinate way. It might be that there's a cheaper solution if everybody would charge when they drive at the pantograph on the road, or if you have the electricity in the road. It might be, but you're not going to do that. It would be much easier if we all did, and much more economical if we all did public transit, but we don't. Everybody prefers to buy their own car. Yeah. Why? It's irrational. Well, we are human beings, right? And so that's the reality we have to deal with, and that's why I think solutions that require huge coordination of huge public funds without the opportunity for distributed investment, with private actors making a decision on my behalf to do my thing, I think we are not going to see that happen. So that's why I'm very convinced that we're going to see not a lot of, I also don't think we're going to see hydrogen trucks take any significant share, because you have to stop every 4.5 hours for 45 minutes anyways. And then you're not, if you have to be with the truck while it recharges hydrogen for 5 or 10 minutes, that's work time. If you park the truck and you plug the charger, that's not work time, that's rest time. And you have to be there for 45 minutes anyway. So there's a lot of things like this where the human behavior, whether it's rational or irrational or regulated or not, changes the parameter of what the technology needs to do.
Yeah, and it comes back to, I think, the point that was made earlier. It's about actually understanding your customers, your users, and you're absolutely right. Truck drivers need to stop, they need to take a break. If you can fix the charging in with that basic cycle, then the business model is much more likely to work. That was a huge tangent, but that just coming back to Martin and the A car, and I mean there is a lot of discussion. I think you started with an agricultural kind of use case. Microtransit, these very small electric vehicles, other use cases, city centres in Europe, for example, where space is really at a premium. Is microtransit, micro-vehicles like the A-car, could they actually be a scaled-up urban solution in the context, clearly, of a broader approach to kind of integrated urban mobility? And it won't happen overnight. But could it play a kind of a major role? And from your perspective, again, of looking to kind of scale up, expand your product, how might that work?
I think that's a very good question, and actually from what we see from our perspective as EVUM, and especially with customers which we already have, is that there is a clear trend into this area of scaling down the vehicles which you have. And we see it in Germany or in Europe in municipalities. A very good example is garbage trucks, which, there's the huge garbage trucks which you have driving through the city, collecting all the garbage. And especially if you want to electrify them, we are talking about €1 million which you need if you want to buy one. And the second one is, from what we hear is, with overcrowded streets, many vehicles being parked on the streets, it's really becoming a huge issue for them to, navigate with these big trucks through the city. So even the way how they are operating is changing. They are switching to mobile, smaller vehicles like ours, light commercial vehicles, collecting it, in a very independent way, bringing it to the hubs, which are near the highway, and then, bringing it on the highway out of the city. So that's a clear trend which we can see, and especially if you think about electrifying your fleets and diversifying your investment and having more smaller vehicles which are quite independent, where you can use route optimization, where you can use it for different purposes. It's even leading to even lower total cost of ownership which you have in the end, because we know that with a vehicle like what we discussed with an electric vehicle or a vehicle like ours, you have 30-40% TCO savings. But looking at the whole fleet, if you are trying to go to a microtrend and using a kind of modular vehicle. It can be used for different purposes, each even much more. And from the impact point of view, I think that is quite a point where which you can reach, and you have really high impact, especially if you are trying to connect it to the grid. If you see it not only as a mobility solution, and not only as a work solution, but even as an energy solution, that you bring the vehicles, you don't have to charge all the vehicles at once. That's what we know for sure. In B2B areas, many of these vehicles are in use 8 to 10 hours a day, and are being parked in the garage for 10, 14 hours. And in that case, you don't have to charge them all at once. You can use them for V2G purposes, so you can monetize the investment which you have in the battery and in the vehicle on the other side.
Okay. And you mentioned vehicle to grid, and that's come up a few times. So this is putting EVs now into kind of the broader context of the energy transition. Yeah. And your EVs are effectively another energy storage device within the broader system. So in terms of, which in technical terms, you can see how that works. In terms of the regulation of the energy market and the governance issues, and actually different players need to talk to each other, how difficult is that, and what are the challenges, and how might they be overcome?
Of course, there are in the region there are regulatory issues according to it. If you are going to the national grid, but the trend is definitely clear. It's going to happen. It's happening in Europe, and it will go to other regions too. I'm quite confident that it will happen. On the other side, you don't always have to go to the national grid. If you have your in a B2B customer, you have your space, you have your garage where the vehicles are being parked, you have already solar on the roof. You can use it even on your own island solution as an energy storage or as an energy buffer without going to the grid. I think that's the first natural step, which is happening already now. Yeah. And the next step would be definitely going to the grid, which we know there is a regulatory issues, but in some regions it's already started to work, and that's a clear trend, because if you have all this energy storage, which is decentralized in a vehicle batteries, it really makes sense to use it. Yeah. That's what we are quite confident, and especially in the B2B area or in bigger fleets where you know the operations, you know when the vehicle is being used and when it's not being used. It's much easier to do it than in a private car and private business, where you never know if at the midnight you don't have to go to a hospital, don't want to use the vehicle and the battery is not charged. In this B2B fleet business, it's planned days before, so it's much easier to use it, to use the battery for connected to the grid and use the energy in the battery. And even lower the TCO too, because with that case, you can lower the TCO again. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so just to pull it back to where we started with the topic of this this panel, beyond cars, we might have said beyond private cars, and you've all said, I think, in slightly different ways, but I think Bjørn, you said it kind of best of all, is almost kind of taking a systems of systems approach. It's not the vehicle, it's not the charging infrastructure, you need to actually consider the system as a whole, and also linking, Rida, to what you said, it's also been bringing in the business model so that you are effectively top down and then kind of dropping down, rather than what sometimes happens is you have a product, you're trying to sell that product, you don't connect to the rest of the system, and then it gets a bit difficult. That brings in, I think there's one question there about whether from a policy perspective, governments, cities, should they be focusing on effectively electrification of fleets and all of the system requirements that are around the electrification of fleet as a way of getting a faster transition to electric mobility and electric transportation, compared to focusing on the private vehicle market? And the example I would say is, if I want to sell 200 electric cars, I have to convince 200 people that they're going to buy a electric car, actually I have to convince maybe 400 people because those 200 people have influencers. And whereas if I want to sell 200 electric buses, I may have to convince 10 people in the company and the municipality to sign into that kind of business case. Just any comments on whether you can accelerate the transition like that?
I think you're forgetting the most important companies to convince, and that's actually OEMs starting to offer product. For a lot of times, it's actually a challenge to get products. And what we've seen, it was very delightful. I was in Poland in 2017. And so I met some pioneers from Ukraine who's been going after electric mobility. And it was funny because we discovered, and I was working then in Costa Rica, and we discovered that the Costa Ricans and Ukrainians were all going to the US to buy used Nissan Leafs to get them into their country so they would have some product available. And so I think that the answer to your question is very short. No, we cannot say that it's only this segment or that segment. It's important to show that this is a whole movement. And there's a dynamic. What truck makers do is so many of them also make buses, and they ask, why do you make buses if you sell 10 times more trucks? Well, the buses is a great way to get into a market and start with a contract, but then we have the servicing also for the trucks. So there's so I think it's important for policymakers to communicate clearly that we have, this is the direction of travel, we are doing all these things to accelerate the speed of travel, and we are providing incentives in this and this sector. But I do think that there's a case to be made that focusing in on and strengthening incentives for commercial, if you have a situation where you're taxating private users but not de facto commercial, you have, and you give a tax relief for private. We've seen it in Norway, right? Where private drivers were like now is 90% share in the private domain that is all electric, whereas in the commercial it's only 30–40%. And that is down to tax incentives. So it means that we should definitely do everything we can to make the private sector do. And we can do that with fiscal policies, we can do that with access policies, road access policies, road pricing. But we can also do this with public awareness and kind of positivity and market driving. Like the companies buying transport services, they now have to think about their scope 2 and 3 emissions.
Yeah.
And so having electric vehicles doing their jobs for them, and commercial vehicles, actually will help them on that as well. So I think the government can do a lot also that doesn't cost cash, but that costs a bit of coordination and of sort of driving the movement.
Yeah.
And what we should not forget, we are now discussing about mostly private and businesses, and what we see, and I think it definitely has to happen even for the government, it's even the public vehicles on public sector. They have fleets too, and definitely it's very difficult to make clear regulations for the private people, for businesses, to electrify the fleets and not lead by example by the public sector. So what we see, and what we see as a very good catalyst of pushing this forward, especially in the public sector, is if there's a clear electrification strategy of even public fleets, with clear targets, which is not catalyzing the whole system, moving forward and leading by example. Because it's very difficult for cities to restrain the private people going into the city with diesel or ICE vehicles, and on the other side, collecting garbage with diesel trucks. And that's what we see as a trend, and which is definitely a catalyst for moving forward towards electrification.
Well, and I totally agree with Martin. It's not an initiative that could be taken by governments alone, or OEMs alone, or the service providers. It's all about synergies, enablement, and most importantly, to be customer-centric. Because if we are not fulfilling the customer needs, then the entire ecosystem would collapse. In Blu EV, we realized this in a very, very early stage of our operation. And as a result, we give the same value and attention to business innovation as we give to the technology innovation. Meaning that the business developers at Blu EV must be as creative, as innovative as our tech people, by creating certain models that are adopted by government agencies, that are creating synergies between them and other stakeholders, by taking the hands of the OEMs and helping the engineering departments within the OEMs to be compatible with our network, and all to serve at the end the customer who is the user and the decision maker in making transformation from ICE to electric vehicle. And in order to do that, Blu EV, it's not about powering 2- and 3-wheelers with swap batteries or solving all the problems of cost or range by making our platform fulfilling the needs of their their vehicles. It's beyond that. It's a platform where they have insurance services, where they can get access to finance, where the gig workers who are underserved, who don't have, who are not bankable actually, who don't have access to leasing, where they can purchase the vehicles from our platform, where they can have more cost-effective for owning the vehicles and then for powering the vehicles with our batteries, and for those financial institutions to get more secure, cashless, and less hassle foundation for their businesses. So it's about this entire movement that you, as enabler, help the stakeholders within the system to move forward towards sustainability and electrification.
Yeah, and in my opinion, so starting with fleets is a very good start because it's a fairly easy implementation. And if you go back to one of the main challenges, like the chicken or the egg problem, okay? I mean, I have electric vehicles, but I don't have infrastructure. I have infrastructure, but there's not enough vehicles and so on. So pushing fleets is a good way to start to bring in the mass into this idea. Remember, petrol or diesel vehicles are very easy, very convenient. I mean, we are used to it. We are born with it. So this is what the easiest solution for us. So if there is no like clear vision from the public sector on what they want to do and supporting this idea, nobody will, I mean, not many people will jump in electric vehicles just because they like electric vehicles.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. So for example, what we see in Germany at the beginning, the electric vehicle sales were very slow till the government made a lot of incentives to push for fleets, like, you know, the company vehicles as an example. So they are taxed 25% compared to the diesel vehicles. So now everyone wants to drive electric vehicles no matter what. You know, okay, I'll suffer with some infrastructure, you know, finding charging infrastructure, but I'm saving a lot of money. You know, so these kind of incentives, whether it's like on taxes, whether it's on purchase price, whether on, you know, some facilitation and support from the government, it has to start from there. It has to start from, okay, I have a vision, and how can I help the private sector to fulfill this vision? And then I think once this dynamic starts, it's then easy for other people to jump in because, okay, there's infrastructure, there are a lot of different vehicles available in the market. Now with economy of scale, vehicles are getting more accessible and more affordable, and so on. So of course the public sector needs to have the first push for that.
Okay. We've got 4 minutes left, so as usual, we're running out of time. I'd just like to focus on the word sustainability, because that is sort of in the brief for this panel. It's been mentioned a few times, and I think you will have 1 minute each, so it's going to be really quick. But sustainability in two contexts. Firstly, when you talk about sustainability, you know, you automatically jump to environmental sustainability. Yeah, which is a direct line of sight to electrification. But I think here we've also been talking about economic, social, the sustainable development goals, social value, the broader agenda, that electrification needs to be sustainable in all of those contexts if actually it's going to move forward. That might be just a yes or a no. And I think it was something Bjørn you said about no one's going to use public transport in if we focus specifically on environmental sustainability and the link between electrification in all its forms and some of the other ways you might get sustainable mobility, whether it's demand management, whether it's modal shift to public transport, whether it's going out and kind of walking and cycling more, is that an important part of the debate as well? Or electrification, technology will solve all our problems? And you've got about 45 seconds each.
Absolutely,
Absolutely.
absolutely. And the point is, with an electric vehicle, you're taking more of the investment cost up front. So higher utilization improves the intensity of use. There's no emission from the use, right?
Yeah.
So it's very much hand in hand. Increasing usage improves the footprint further. Yeah.
Correct.
Yes, and increasing energy efficiency in the end, it's if you only switching from, 100 vehicles as of today with ICE vehicles to 100 electric vehicles of the same type, it's not, solving the problem. So it's about understanding, like what we discussed, how the fleet is being used, what are the use scenario, and not only bringing electric vehicles, but even optimizing the fleet and the vehicle which you use for the impact in the end.
Well, I think mobility as a service, which we started with the battery as a service, is catering the sustainability as such, because sustainability, especially in the mobility, without traceability, it's meaningless. It's not about the vehicle that you replaced, the ICE vehicle that you replaced with EV. It's about the miles that you do. What's the mileage that you do here with an EV that you were supposed to be more greener instead of using an ICE for the same mileage. So having that said, those platforms, the technology enablement for electric vehicle as such would help sustainability by traceability, and then by transforming all those privately held vehicles to be publicly used, heading to the concept where mobility as a service and where the outright purchase of the private car is meaningless for the user, like Martin was saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, from a technology point of view, it enables sustainability. I mean, electric vehicles are sustainable, so there's no doubt about this. But the infrastructure for it also needs to be sustainable. So it doesn't make sense that I have to have a charging station every 10 miles or 10 kilometers. This is not sustainable. Again, back to what Bjørn was saying, you need to look at the use case and see really what I need. There is a lot of other solutions, like especially in this region, it's a huge opportunity having solar charged battery storage charging system. So it's a whole sustainable charging station by its own, and we have been working with a company in Saudi Arabia to implement this, and it's a huge opportunity to make charging infrastructure sustainable.
Okay, and literally the clock has gone red. So we are out of time. I thought this was going to be really difficult to try and summarize and get commonality between, motorbikes and scooters at one end and mining trucks at the other. I think we've managed it. I think there's some very useful points coming out of that. It is about taking a kind of an overview, systems or ecosystem, as it was talked about. It's about having the right policies and the regulations. That technology is a tool to deliver sustainability, however you define sustainability, in environmental, social, economic, social value terms. Thanks for a great discussion, and I think we're done.
The question.
Oh, a question. Okay.
I think you can come up.
Yep.
Hi, good afternoon. My question is to Dr. Martin. So you mentioned that in your company, you have something which is very similar to net metering, where your car can send the electricity back to the grid. So am I right in understanding that?
Yep, that's the right understanding. That we are trying to connect the vehicle to the grid.
Mm-hmm. So in this, as a battery technologist, I just have one concern. Wouldn't this, what do you call, accelerate, what do you call, the decrease in the battery health, the reductions in the cycle? And if it would, but is there any alternative that you're looking at rather than the traditional batteries then to, combat this?
It's definitely, it will decrease the lifetime of the battery, but I think that there are two main points. It depends on the chemistry of the battery which you use. There, we know that LFP is much better according to cycle stability and so on. And the second point is, and that's always crucial for the battery, is how much power are you getting out and in? So what's the C rate of the battery power according to the energy storage which is stored in the battery? And if you do it in an optimized way, we assume that you will not have that high impact. There will be an impact, definitely, but according to the cost which you have, you can generate revenues with doing it. We can optimize your energy system with it, which can lower the cost. So from the business point of view, we are assuming, and it's quite clear, it's a positive business case. Even if there is a small impact on the lifetime of the battery, it makes sense from the business point of view.
If I may just give a suggestion, why don't you look into redox flow batteries, especially like same electrolyte batteries like vanadium flow batteries and all. So maybe this could be a better option than the traditional batteries?
It could be definitely for the future. It could be an option, but we are looking for an option which is already in there in the market, which we can use and build in the vehicles. And we know that even with the batteries which are there as of today, it can work, and it's definitely working. Right. But in the future, it could be very interesting. Sure. Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, any other questions? Because we are completely out of time now, so thank you.